Alright, today I got something special for you guys. We got a katana documentary. Very excited to watch this. Let's get right to it.
Though only a small amount of metal, it is a weapon of great strength and elegance. Nor is it just a weapon. It is an instrument of which beauty is demanded. Within its calm serenity lurks a deep sadness, hidden by a mystical brilliance.
Alright, first off, man, katanas are just freaking beautiful. Katanas are probably my favorite sword.
Once born, each Japanese sword possesses a destiny. It must not break or bend. It must cut like a knife through.
I always thought it was really cool how they attacked with these types of swords. It just looks so cool. Coming out of the sheath, you know?
Through butter. When samurai warriors donned their swords, they required them to look exquisite. A sword not only had the utility of a weapon, but also made a fine possession. The pursuit of these twin virtues gives the Japanese sword a unique and illustrious history.
Oh man, you make one mistake on that and man, you have really got to trust your sparring partner if you're using actually sharp swords. I mean, one wrong move and you're cutting off your buddy's limbs. That's crazy.
Yoshindo Yoshihara, Swordsmith, 54. Although there are many swordsmiths in Japan, Yoshindo is one of the few whose unique skills have gained him a following even overseas. He devotes himself to creating only the most beautiful swords. We will be seeing just how he goes about making a single sword. We will also learn just what the secrets are behind a sword that is strong and yet so pleasing to the eye.
Yes, I cannot wait. This is gonna be good.
Yoshindo has never before revealed the secrets of his craft to the layman. Today, we will be allowed a glimpse into this mysterious art.
Alright, we get to watch Yoshindo Yoshihara, a master at work. This is gonna be amazing.
The art of Japanese sword making reached its pinnacle at the beginning of the 13th century during the Kamakura period. Modern swordsmiths aim to emulate the incredibly high standards of those times.
That's so true. The standards that they had back then, so freaking high. The swords back then were of such high quality that we've been trying to chase that ever since. Yeah, swords from that period, they're worth buku bucks. And for good reason.
The secret of a Japanese sword's strength lies in its dual composition. It consists of a softer, more flexible core steel, known as shingane, swathed in a hard outer steel jacket.
Ooh, okay. That is a great design for a sword. The softer core is gonna make it more tough. It'll be able to bend a little bit, but that hard outer jacket, that's gonna keep it all tight. It's gonna keep the edge. So yeah, that's just about a perfect design for a sword. Soft core, hard outer jacket. That's phenomenal.
Known as kawagane. This makes the sword superbly strong, difficult to break, and gives it an excellent cutting edge. The other key characteristic of Japanese swords is the use of a raw material known as tama.
So even their steel source is very, very unique. Outside of Japan, steel is usually made in a blast furnace when you smelt iron ore. And it's a whole process, and it's called bloomery steel. You can look up blooms, steel blooms. It's a whole different process than what the Japanese use.
Hakane. This special kind of Japanese steel is made by heating satetsu, or iron sand, over charcoal at comparatively low temperatures, resulting in a steel that is low in impurities. Elsewhere in the world, steel from blast furnaces is used.
Yeah, see, there you go, blast furnaces. But the process sounds very, very similar, honestly. Because a blast furnace, you use coal and iron ore. That's basically it. And it sounds like they just about do the same process. So I would love to learn actually how they actually smelt it. I wonder if they're going to show us. It sounds like the iron sand and their resulting steel is very, very pure.
Japan, rather than using coke, the smelting of tamahagane is done using charcoal throughout. The swordsmith has to distinguish between the different pieces of steel and pick out carefully those best suited to making a sword. This is the smithy, where swords are created. The setup is very simple. To the left of the forge is a piston-operated bellows. This pumps air into the forge to allow the temperature to be adjusted. These are the tools needed in making a sword. There are tools for grasping the steel and others for hammering it. A special kind of pine charcoal, known as matsuzumi, is used as a fuel for the forge because of its ability to produce a lot of heat.
His forge is really cool. I love it. I don't see a single power tool, which is even cooler. Doing everything by hand. Old school. He's got the double action bellows and charcoal. That is super old school. I love it.
Yoshindo performs a traditional fire lighting ceremony typical of a swordsmith. First, he hammers a plain iron rod down to a sharp point. When the tip of the rod is struck hard and fast, the point absorbs enough heat to be able to light a piece of paper. This kind of hammering technique is the starting point for Japanese sword making. Using this...
Alright, that's probably the coolest way to light your forge. He's basically making fire with his hammer and a piece of steel. Remember, no matter what the substance is, if you compress it, it's going to heat up. That is so freaking cool.
Flame, he lights the forge. Charcoal is added, and the forge soon begins to produce heat. Yoshindo places the tamahagane in the forge, the first step of making the kawagane steel jacket.
Alright, so he's forging the harder outer jacket first. So the tamahagane pieces that he's putting in right now are going to be on the higher side of carbon content.
Working the bellows, the smith pumps blasts of air into the forge. Adjusting the heat, he smelts the tamahagane.
Working the bellows has got to keep Yoshindo in great shape. My goodness.
A single Japanese sword typically weighs between 750 and 950 grams. During the sword-making process, most of the raw material...
Wow, so they're starting out with 4 times the steel that's going to actually end up in the sword.
Material is removed as impurities. Therefore, around 3 or 4 times this quantity of tamahagane is used to make a katana.
Man, so he's got 2 disciples swinging sledgehammers. Must be nice. No, but seriously, you can move so much steel like that? My goodness. Probably better than a power hammer, to be honest with you.
When the piece of tamahagane has become red hot, Yoshindo pulls it out of the forge and holds it on the anvil while his disciples...
That's pretty cool. So he's like conducting the hammer strikes with his smaller hammer. He's a blacksmithing conductor. That's pretty cool.
hammer it flat using 10-kilo hammers. The hammering is repeated several times. With Yoshindo tapping out directions, the tamahagane is quickly made flat. During this process, the impurities within the steel rise to the surface and can be hammered out.
So he's still focused on getting all of the impurities out as much as possible so that it's literally just pure steel. And it started out pretty damn pure to start with, and then they make it more pure. Whoa, he's using water. That is super interesting. Why the hell is he using water? Everything I've learned in terms of modern blacksmithing, water no good for hot steel. But I mean, I'm not going to doubt the master, that's for damn sure. This is probably some like 200 IQ forging technique. Let's see.
Once the steel is about the same thickness as a cracker, the process known as mizuuchi is performed. Water is sprinkled underneath the steel wafer, and it is hammered once more. The combined effect of the steam and the shock induced by hammering causes the surface to peel off. Impurities disappear. This part of the operation, known as shitagoshirai, or foundation forging in Japanese, is critical for removing as many of the impurities as possible before proceeding to the next stage.
Wow. So not only is he actively throwing water on/under the piece of hot steel, it's just so odd. I've never seen anyone do that before. But apparently, this is how they get all the impurities to actually come off of the hot piece of steel. The shock of the hammer combined with the water shock, you know? So he's basically shocking the steel. That is very interesting. These techniques are very interesting. I would love to actually try these out in the forge. Maybe I'll try to forge a katana one of these days, and I'll try to use all these techniques. What do you think?
When the steel is quenched in water, cooling it down quickly, it is made harder. The wafers of hardened tamahagane are broken into smaller pieces. At this stage, the carbon content of the steel is still too high. Although hard, the steel in its current state would make a sword weak and extremely brittle. Yoshindo must once again select which of the small, thin, broken-up wafers of tamahagane are best suited to make the sword.
Okay, so then he's quenching it on purpose to make it brittle, and then he's going to break it up into more pieces. Interesting.
Right.
断面がきれいに割れてますね。こういうのはだいたいこのくらいのものっていうのは炭素量が 1% から 1.23% あります。
Dang, 1% and 1.3% carbon content. That's huge. For reference, 0.95% carbon content is very high carbon. This, 1% to 1.3%, that's gigantic. That's a lot of carbon.
ですから釜金用に使います。こっちの方はですね、炭素量が低くて柔らかい鋼なのでなかなか割れません。ですからこういうふうに断面が、ちょっと黒ずんだりこう折れ曲がったりきれいに割れてないんですね。こういうものは新金用として使うんです。 これだけ違いますからね。
Yeah, so without any sort of carbon testing or carbon knowledge about the steel that he's working with, so just by looking at these pieces of steel, he's able to tell the carbon content pretty damn precisely. This guy's a master. I like his handle stick for that. Very, very cool. Yeah, I've grown to love welding bars to my steel billets I'm working with. Just makes it easier to handle. You don't have to worry about tongs. Tongs can be kind of a pain in the ass. Stick, good. I like stick.
Yoshindo makes a steel plate welded to a long handle out of tamahagane steel. Together, these are known as the tekogane. All the operations are performed with barely a word spoken. The commands of the swordsmith's hammer is all that is required.
Alright, that hammer work is just entrancing. That is so cool to watch. It is music to my ears. Guy's like freaking Mozart, dude. Now that's interesting. I have no idea what the clay slurry would do. That's very, very interesting though. I wonder why he does it.
In due course, the tekogane plate will itself become part of the sword. On top of it, Yoshindo stacks a pile of the selected tamahagane wafers, leaving no gaps in between the separate pieces.
Man, that looks like a small breeze is gonna knock it over. Let's see what Yoshindo does.
To make a sword strong and flexible, the steel must be completely uniform throughout the length of the blade. To achieve this, many layers are squeezed together in the forging process.
That looks like a pain in the ass. So he's over here playing metal Legos. I don't know how the hell he's gonna forge weld that without it falling apart. That seems like a very hard task, but I'm sure he can do it. I'm just interested to see how he does it.
Burning rice straw is another vital part of the whole operation.
I think he just likes playing with fire. But seriously, I'm very interested to see what he uses this rice ash for. Some super secret technique.
The black rice straw ashes, known as warabai, are wrapped around the steel during forging to prevent overheating, which would result in too great a loss of carbon. This makes them one of the secrets of sword creation.
Okay, so that's pretty clever. So the ash from the rice straw is gonna mitigate the carbon loss. That's freaking genius. Again, carbon will bake out of the steel. That's just what happens.
The steel wafers are skillfully arranged on top of the tekogane plate to make a block of steel. To prevent the wafers from spilling over, collapsing, or falling off, the smith carefully wraps the block with wetted Japanese paper.
He's wrapping it up like a steel burrito. You know what they say, wrap it before you tap it with a hammer.
The black warabai ashes are coated onto the paper-wrapped bundle. This helps compensate for the loss of carbon that occurs with heating. Yoshindo now pours a clay and water mixture over the block.
Okay, that's pretty damn interesting. Not only does he have the rice ash covering the whole billet, he's also adding clay to it too. I don't know why he would add the clay. It's pretty interesting.
The clay and ash wrapping ensures that heat passes evenly through the block to its core.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So that's gonna help it heat up a lot more evenly. There's not gonna be hot spots or like the edges of the corners that could get a lot hotter. That's freaking ingenious. I love it.
As the temperature of the block mostly rises from the inside out, this prevents carbon loss happening on the surface only. The result is a steel block which is uniform. The use of straw and the clay slurry is typically Japanese.
Yeah, that's such an interesting technique. Yeah, Japanese smiths were just on a whole nother level.
The next step in the process is known as tsumiwakashi in Japanese, which literally means piling up and boiling. Yoshindo places the steel block in the forge and heats it slowly, adjusting the air with the bellows. Since different temperatures act on various materials to produce differing kinds of swords, the process demands a combination of intuition and experience.
And yeah, again, with this method of forging, it's super easy to burn the steel. You could burn the crap out of your billet without even, so quick. So he's constantly trying not to burn the steel. He's being very careful, very precise.
Peeping into the forge, he can see that the surface paper and ash wrappings have already melted. He does not want to melt the entire block of steel away. Sensing when the inside of the tamahagane block is almost boiling demands a high degree of skill.
Man, that is one hot billet. Man, you can see just how much the billet's moving around and stuff and shifting. Yeah, right here, you gotta be very careful not to hit it the wrong way. Just nice, steady pressure.
Once the layers of tamahagane have been compacted, the block is rewrapped and placed in the forge once more.
Okay, so he's coating it with the rice ash again. And back in the forge. Dang, that billet's a sparkler.
もう少し強く。
Starting to get a little more solid, starting to hit it a little harder. It's pretty interesting too. With forge welding, you can actually hear the difference in the steel when it becomes forge welded from before. It's pretty cool. If you listen carefully, you can hear it here too. Starting to look like it's getting forge welded. It's getting there. Man, with two people swinging sledgehammers like that, you can get some pretty good pressure and force on that billet. The guys swinging the hammer have to be pretty damn precise too.
The rhythm of Yoshindo's small hammer tells his disciples wielding the large hammers how hard and fast they should hit the steel.
Yeah, just the whole hammering process going on here is just, it's just so cool to watch. And again, more rice ash before going back in the forge. Seems like a pretty constant in the process. Very interesting.
In the next stage, a cut is chiseled into the block and the steel is folded back over itself, resulting in a new piece double the original thickness. This process is known as orikaishi, or folding back in Japanese. Each time this is repeated, more impurities within the tamahagane, principally titanium, phosphorus, and sulfur, are peeled or scraped off, or scattered by the hammer blows. Each repeat also reduces the carbon content a fraction.
That was a gorgeous fold job. He made that look really easy, and it's really not. It can be really tough to just fold a piece of steel in half. Sounds real simple, but it's not.
To reach the correct level, the process needs to be repeated around a dozen times. The orikaishi continues, and each time the new block is wrapped in ashes and coated in the clay slurry.
Okay, I thought we were done with the clay slurry. I guess not. I guess it's all part of the whole protecting the carbon in the steel process. Or I shouldn't say protecting, more like preserving. And a dozen times? That might not sound like a lot. Each fold is going to double the layer count, and they're going to do it 12 times. That's going to be a lot of layers. And it's not really for the sake of having a lot of layers. Like they said, this whole folding process, it's not to increase the amount of layers. It's to get all the impurities out of the steel that they possibly can. So it's basically like a purification process. Very interesting.
The block is stretched by hammering it to double its original length before folding. The first cut was made crosswise. The next cut is made lengthwise. Cutting this way in a cross formation.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, alternating the folds like that, that's gonna yield a very uniform piece of steel. And its carbon content, it's gonna get all the impurities out. Very cool.
Is a matter of careful calculation. What is the purpose of it? Experimenting with this clay model illustrates the principles involved here. The flattened wafers of tamahagane all differ in their precise carbon content. Thus, when stacked, heated, and then hammered, the parts meld, and the whole gains even greater strength. Hundreds and thousands of thin steel layers pile up on top of one another and become enmeshed, creating a dense structure. With every repeat of orikaishi, the number of layers doubles. After the 10th time, the steel consists of 1,024 layers or more.
Okay, this Play-Doh demonstration is perfect. This is a great visual representation of what happens with the steel. Also, something else you could do with, well, clay or Play-Doh, I guess. But practicing your hammer swings when you're first starting out, or practicing how to move something with a hammer, getting some oil-based clay, or I mean any clay really, but oil-based isn't going to dry out, so it's a lot better for continued use and stuff like that. But it's a great way to practice moving something and shaping something, seeing how the hammer moves something. It's a very good way to practice.
After polishing of the final blade, these different layers show up in an exquisite surface pattern known as the sword's jihada. In the folding lies the secret to the sword's combination of strength and beauty. The swordsmith's individuality is strongly reflected in the interplay of colors and textures in the final sword. The jihada, in particular, is an important way of differentiating between the work of different craftsmen. The stage is now set for the smith to sever the steel from its tekogane handle.
Man, I could watch them hammer that hot steel all day. Alright, looks like we're ready for the next step. Just coming off the handle.
The hard, toughened steel is bent into a U shape, which becomes the sword's outer casing, or jacket, the kawagane.
Alright, we got the steel taco taking shape. It can be deceivingly difficult to actually shape it into a really good taco, or boat, you know? One of the things that Yoshindo did to make it real easy is he had that sort of jig, the little thing that he... Jigs are going to make your life so much easier as a blacksmith or any craftsman. It's just anything that you can make to make your process easier, whether it's shaping or hanging on to something. If you want to make your job easy, make the right jigs.
Formed by a similar process, the slightly softer shingane forms the core of the sword and is inserted inside the jacket.
And there it is, the final combination. And again, forge welding this can be very tricky, very tricky. I'm sure Yoshindo's got it down to a science though.
Hardened steel is used for the cutting edge. The more flexible inside of the sword absorbs the shock of an attacking stroke. This use of harder and softer steels in Japanese swords distinguishes them from swords made elsewhere, which are made of a uniform steel throughout.
Yeah, using the two different steels is just really good blade engineering. Yeah, mono steel blades, which is just one type of steel throughout the whole thing. It's a uniform piece of steel. Homogeneous carbon content. Those blades can be great, but when you take these two different steels and you engineer it how he's doing, it makes it way better, way stronger. It's a complex process, but in the end, it's worth it. Especially when you're talking about performance.
The key point here is that the swordsmith assembles the different forged kawagane and shingane layers of the sword so that the grains of each run at right angles to one another.
Oh shit, that's even more genius. So not only is it, you know, two different steels making it a very, very good combination, but also the layers are running perpendicular to each other, which is just going to make it that much stronger. Wow, that is perfect. Again, they're making the strongest possible design. Absolutely incredible.
The precise way the kawagane and shingane combine leads to a myriad of different possibilities, producing swords of varying strength and movement. The beauty of the jihada truly reflects the skill of its creator. The initial forging is now complete.
Okay, so that's different. We've seen him use the rice ash before going into the forge. He just did it right after he took it out of the forge before he put it on the anvil for hammering. I guess using it throughout the whole process, you're protecting the carbon a little bit. I guess throughout the whole process you want to keep the rice ash on there as much as possible. A very fascinating process. I'd love to run some tests on a blade made with this technique, and then a blade made without this technique, and then see how those blades actually test in terms of carbon content. I think that'd be really interesting. I mean, I'm certainly not doubting this process. I'm just saying I'd love to know how big of a difference it makes. That's all.
Yoshindo now moves on to shape the sword to his liking. The composite steel blank used as the basis for the sword, incorporating both the kawagane jacket and the shingane core, is known as the tsunobe in Japanese. Yoshindo puts the combined bar into the forge, taking care not to heat it too much.
Man, I'm still very impressed with how much steel they can move with those two sledgehammers. They're moving it pretty damn good.
He then hammers it into the rough shape of a sword, lengthening it as he goes. He has to be careful not to destroy the balance between the jacket and the core steels.
And yeah, again, throughout this whole process, any time in the forge, he could literally burn his sword to a crisp and it'd be no good. So the fact that he's constantly trying not to burn his steel makes it just 10 times harder. And then on top of everything else that he's trying to do, preserve the carbon, move the steel in a way so that it preserves exactly where the hard outer jacket is and the soft inner core is. Everything this guy does is just 12 out of 10.
By separating the tsunobe from the tekogane rod, he creates the piece.
Oh shit, there it is! That hunk of steel that came off. That's gonna be bladed perfection right there. Alright, what's next?
That will become the final sword.
And again, hot steel and water goes against everything I learned. It honestly makes me wonder if, by exposing the steel to this sort of stressful process multiple times, you know, because he's used water before, with the hammer and the anvil earlier, now he's throwing it in water. I wonder if continued exposure to that sort of stress on the steel, if it like changes something on the inside, you know, like it makes it stronger, or I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, just thinking out loud. So I get why he was doing water with the hammer in the earlier stages to get all the impurities out. Is he still trying to do that at this stage? Because other than the, breaking off the impurities and stuff, I don't know what the advantage of using water now would be. Huh. Very interesting. I wonder if they'll say why.
By this stage, practically all of the impurities have been beaten out of the tamahagane, leaving only about a third of the weight of the original material.
Okay, so they just said all the impurities are basically gone. So, it just makes me wonder why the water. I mean, it's all part of the process, obviously, and Yoshindo definitely knows what he's doing.
Here, Yoshindo forms the tip of the blade.
And you can really see how precisely he's forging. He's checking it every couple hits. He's making sure nothing's getting out of whack. I love his forging style. It's very precise. I mean, just look at how straight those lines are. The edges are super crisp. I mean, it looks like this thing just came out of a factory. That looks so good. So he definitely has certain dimensions or a ratio in mind. I wonder what that ratio is, or what the measurements are. And there it is. Starting to look like a sword.
The process of shaping the blade out of the sonobe and giving it curvature is known in Japanese as hizukuri. His disciple's assistance is necessary up until the formation of the sonobe, but hizukuri is the job of the swordsmith alone. He proceeds with a conceived shape in mind. This part of the process brings all his senses and technique to the fore.
Now it looks like he's forging pretty darn close to the final shape of the blade. He's putting in the bevel right now that comes off of the spine. Yeah, his hammer work is just phenomenal.
It is crucial at this stage to minimize the number of times the blade is heated up.
Ah, okay. I was wondering why he's taking it off the anvil in between hits. It's because any contact with the anvil It's gonna suck the heat right out of that steel. Yeah, he's taking great care to make sure that there's no unnecessary heat loss. Because any time in contact with the anvil, it's gonna suck the heat out of that steel so quick. It's remarkable how quick steel cools down on a anvil surface.
Yoshindo must move with lightning speed to prevent any more carbon leaching out of the blade. Conserving the steel is a vital skill. The smith must prevent the sword from cooling or impurities from adulterating the sword. Producing an attractive jihada on a blade surface is a sign of fine craftsmanship.
Now, I'm honestly not sure if jihada is another term for the hamon, or what exactly jihada refers to on the surface of the blade. They weren't very clear on that, but I have a feeling it's related to the hamon, or it's part of the hamon. I don't know. See, now, to me, being just intermediate blacksmith, if you don't want the steel to cool down, then you wouldn't use water while you're hitting it. But obviously it's important to the process, otherwise he wouldn't be doing it. It just makes me wonder.
The actual curvature of the sword is not manifest until later, when the edge of the blade is hardened.
That is such a good looking blade. Everything is so straight, so even. The tip looks phenomenal. That's what she said.
This makes it very difficult to imagine exactly how curved it will turn out to be. The swordsmith must use his experience to determine his sword's final shape, and thus its elegance. Once hizukuri is complete, you can begin to imagine the blade in all its final splendor.
Yeah, so it looks like he forges just about as close as he can get to the final shape of the blade. Most bladesmiths don't forge to shape. A lot of people just grind to shape, but I have so much respect for people that forge to shape. It's beyond difficult, because any little wrong hammer blow could just ruin the whole thing. You hit it wrong in one certain spot, too hard, or you're not square, it's just very hard. So props to Yoshindo. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less from a master.
The shape of Japanese swords changed over the ages as methods of waging battle changed. These different styles and methods of use have all added to the complexity of the Japanese sword-making craft.
Man, that is one gorgeous hamon. That looks so cool. The straight hamones look really good too. I think the wavy hamones look the coolest though.
Having used his hammer to shape the blade, Yoshindo now begins the finishing process. First, he does a rough filing. This determines the blade's frame. This part of the
Again, everything this guy's doing, 100% manpower. He's not using a single power tool, just his hands and muscles. Man, I have so much respect for doing all this by hand.
process is finished with a whetstone.
Dang. His grinds look so freaking even. Everything this guy does looks like just a precise machine. He does such a good job. Wow. That's why he's the best.
All surface oil is removed using an ash water solution, and the blade is then dried thoroughly. The smith now turns his attention to the single most important part of the blade, the hamon.
Hey Mom, they're talking about hamones!
This is the pattern created along the blade in its final quenching. Yoshindo's own particular specialty is a type of hamon called ochoji, or big clove blossom, a derivative of the clove blossom patterning.
Wow. That is a cool looking hamon. That's freaking beautiful.
Developed to perfection in the Kamakura period, this type of hamon is considered one of the most beautiful. To make a hamon with this wonderfully variable pattern, a special clay is used. The adhesive clay is made out of a mixture of charcoal, pulverized whetstone, and other ingredients. The exact proportions are the smith's own personal secret.
Ah, so he's got a proprietary blend. Gosh dang it, of course it's a secret. I want to know.
Having carefully prepared the mixture, Yoshindo applies it to the roughly ground sword with equal delicacy. The clay is painted onto the blade in a thin layer. Once it is dry, it will be fired. The precise details of this process of making the hamon, called tsuchioki, or placing the clay in Japanese, have been a closely guarded secret of Japanese swordsmiths since time immemorial.
Man, there's something about just watching him apply this clay that is just, it's like watching a freaking artist. I also really like his sword holding jig that he has right here. It's a pretty cool little setup.
Yoshindo now uses a thicker clay mixture to coat the remainder of the sword. This coating is to ensure that the blade does not heat up too much and overharden.
Yeah, so it looks like he's going a lot thicker on the spine clay. So it's thicker on the spine and thinner on that bevel part that goes down to the edge. Okay, here we go. This is how he does the hamon, the clove blossom hamon.
It is this process that brings out the hamon. Yoshindo makes his signature clove blossom pattern using a fine spatula to place the clay on the blade. A complex pattern of straight lines, crosses, and points will result in the wondrous clove blossom, or choji hamon.
It's such an interesting setup for what it actually turns into with these lines of clay, how it actually turns into that clove blossom hamon. Very interesting. The whole process of this bringing out the hamon is just very, very fascinating.
The tsuchioki process for the clove blossom hamon is now complete. Exactly how the hamon is created is still something of a mystery, however.
Alright, there it is. Looks like we're done. Looks like we're ready for the next step.
This is a pattern for a relatively straight hamon, called suguha in Japanese. This hamon is known as the notare pattern and is famously attributed to the master swordsmith Kanemitsu Bizen. Its slightly irregular patterning gives it a peculiar beauty all of its own.
Yeah, see, when I think hamon, this is what I picture. The sort of soft waves, that sort of wavy look that it has. Yeah, that's so cool looking.
機能を追求するだけで切れ味だけでいいっていうのならね、本当に簡単なすぐ刃でいいし、それで十分に満足できるんですけども、やっぱり美しさ、その機能の中から出た美しさを追求していくんですからね、どうしてもその丁字乱れであるとか刃中の素晴らしい働きを出したいと思って、うちは
Yeah, there's no like, utility to having it on the blade. There's no utility to the hamon, but Man, it's so beautiful. Yeah, it really turns it from just a sword to a work of art. And he is an artist.
文字乱れを主にやっていますよ。
Finally, we come to the yakiide process of hardening the edge. This is where the sword's underlying elegance is brought out in an instant. Small pieces of matsuzumi charcoal are used to ensure the clay coating does not peel off. Yoshindo takes great care to ensure the heat of the forge is as even as possible.
That is a hell of a quench tank. I guess if I was ever gonna do a Japanese sword, I would have to make a tank like that.
Because he must be able to distinguish very subtle changes in the color of the hot sword, Yoshindo performs yakiide in pitch blackness.
Yeah, that's something that blacksmiths have been doing for a while, trying to make it as dark as possible. It's a lot easier to see the color of the steel, the darker it is.
Carefully passing the sword through the forge with one hand, he pumps air into the forge. Each push of the piston changes the forge temperature, and this has to be judged by the color of the sword. Maintaining the temperature between 725 and 780 degrees Celsius, Yoshindo ensures that the sword is heated evenly all around. Then he quenches the sword suddenly in a trough of water.
I almost feel like I have to unlearn all the blacksmithing rules that I've learned, because this, I mean, quenching in water is a huge no-no. Or at least it's very, very risky. So it really makes me wonder if by using water on the steel throughout the whole process, you know, he's getting his hammer wet, he's throwing the water on the anvil. I wonder if by exposing the steel to that stress, if it prepares it better for the actual big stress of quenching. Very, very interesting. Makes me wonder.
This dramatic cooling, owing to the peculiar properties of steel, produces a different crystalline microstructure at the edge of the blade called martensite, which is particularly hard.
And there it is, all quenched. Frickin' cool. And now you can see it's curved a little bit. Very cool. The quench gives the curve. That's so cool. And he just throws it back in the forge to do a quick temper. It'd be really easy to over or under temper a blade like this, but I mean, this guy's done it probably thousands of times, so he's got it down to a science. He knows exactly how long to put it in. But most tempers, you would you want to put it in like a controlled oven or something at a certain temperature for like an hour or two. So yeah, he's just raw dogging it.
Yoshindo lightly passes the blade through the forge a second time. Next, he tempers it by quenching again. This relieves stress in the hardened edge and ensures the entire blade remains flexible and strong.
Yeah, after you quench steel, it's too hard. So you have to take away some of that hardness to give it a really good balance between toughness and hardness. Because if it's too hard, it'll just break. So you have to take away some of that hardness in order to make it a usable sword.
After yakiide, the curvature of the sword has increased slightly. After further treatment to clean off the clay, we reach the crucial moment when the hamon is revealed. The clove blossom line should be very clearly visible on the blade. At this point...
Wow, check it out. There it is. That looks so freaking cool. And you know what? Also, it's a visual indicator if the quench actually worked. Which actually can be a problem. If you don't get the steel hot enough, if it doesn't cool down quick enough, it won't do what it needs to do. So yeah, that's a pretty cool visual indicator that it actually worked.
Yoshindo can tell whether yakire has been a success or not.
まあ刀の幅はいろいろあっての一概に申せませんけどね、割合としましてはね、元身幅に対してこの先の身幅は、70% ぐらい、厚さの方も元の厚さに対して。
Ah, okay. The secret revealed. So you want the top thickness and width to be 70%. To be 70% of the base thickness and width.
この先の厚さがやっぱり 70% ぐらいっていうのが誰が見ても一番いい形に見える、まあ標準的な形ですね。寸法の割合ですね。
This guy's probably got the most nerve-wracking job, because he could screw up a masterpiece. Sounds very stressful, but he sure looks like he's taking great care. One wrong file, one wrong stroke, and it could just ruin the whole aesthetic.
The blade's tang, called nakago in Japanese, is the part of the sword where the swordsmith carves out his signature marks. The mekugiana, or rivet hole, is drilled into the tang for the rivet that will secure the blade to the hilt of the scabbard. This helps improve the sword's balance. The job of the polisher is to bring out the smith's intended hamon and make the jihada look as good as possible. He helps to breathe life into the sword and bring it to its final state of sparkling brilliance. Inscription marks often include the swordsmith's name, the date of creation, and the name of the person who ordered the sword. The Japanese sword can be thought of having arisen out of the natural desire of every warrior to wield a marvelous weapon in battle.
Just wow. That is freaking beautiful. Oh, dude. That's a freaking gorgeous hamon. Holy shit. I freaking love it. Damn, that's beautiful. Well, alright, that video was packed with information. I freaking loved that. I want to try all those techniques. I want to do it all. Yeah, I definitely want to forge a katana now. Well, alright, that was an inside look at the secret world of the Japanese swordsmiths. That was freaking amazing. There was so much good information in this video. Fascinating information. fascinating techniques, just phenomenal craftsmanship. Yoshindo Yoshihara he's a master. He is a master at swordsmithing. Well, if you made it this far, I just want to say thanks for watching. I appreciate you. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. What you liked, what you didn't like, whether you like katanas. Alright, see ya.